Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's AppSec Secrets, a virtual series brought to you by CISOs. We're going to give people just one more minute while they join before we start. And while we're waiting, I just want to do a few housekeeping reminders. We will be recording this session, so if you want to watch it again, you will have that option. At the same time, we will also be taking questions. There is a question box. You can type your questions in at any time. And we will be having a Q&A at the end, but you don't have to wait to the end to type your question in. So as soon as something burning hits your mind, just type it on into the question box.
I'm sure everyone's going to want to play this many times, Julie.
Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be such a scintillating, exciting conversation. You'll be on the edge of your seat for sure, and you'll want to just hit us on continual replay. Definitely, guarantee it, 100%. Cool. All right. I think this is a great time to start. And again, welcome everyone to today's AppSec Secrets, a virtual series brought to you by CISOs. At CISOs, we focus on a security-first, developer-friendly approach to application security. And this brings security, IT, AppSec, and business leaders together to flip the script on AppSec to discuss what really matters to you. Our goal for this series is to share best practices, the challenges that we see every day, threat intel, so much more. I'm Julie Peterson. I'll be your host today for today's show on how to make application security a growth driver, which I think is really, really interesting. And I am delighted to be joined by security heavyweight Merritt Baer. Let me tell you a little bit about why I'm so excited to be speaking to Merritt today. First of all, she is a field CISO at Lacework and previously served in the office of the CISO at AWS. So she's seen firsthand all the problems we deal with on the front lines. And beyond that, she has experience in all three branches of government. So a really incredible career covering so many different positions and insecurity across both the public and private sector. So it's a really great, unique experience she brings today. So I can think of no better person to talk to today to get insights into how CISOs and exec level security leaders can see the future of application security, the challenges of the practices, and how to truly connect AppSec goals to your business goals so that AppSec can be a growth driver. So welcome, and let's jump right on into it. Merritt, I did a quick introduction, but I'd love to hear from you firsthand. Tell me a little bit about your career journey so far and the things that you're focusing on in your new role.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julie, for having me. I am coming to you today from Miami, where I'm on Tequesta, Miccosukee, and Creek land, among others. And I work for a company called Lacework that works on basically the customer side of that shared responsibility model when we're talking about cloud security. So as you mentioned, I came from AWS. I was actually in the office of the CISO, so a deputy CISO team for over 5 years. And it's interesting coming from a place that is, the cloud itself. I wanted to go to a shop that is working more on the stuff that is in the customer's area of responsibility is kind of the term of art, but like on their side of what they have to care about. And as you know, from an AppSec perspective, a lot of what you care about is stuff that you may have tooling to help you do better, and then you still have to work at it yourself. So what I work on in my role is both helping folks understand, how to get the most out of what they are using from vendor perspectives, whether that's AWS, which everyone seems to forget is also a vendor, or one of the other cloud providers, and also what you're building on top of that, whether that's homegrown, whether it's vendors you're using. And I think as a special distinction, like I don't work in sales. I am not here to pitch anything. What I really work hard on is getting folks to have the muscle groups and mechanisms within their organization, within their security shop, within their infrastructure, their cloud ops team, however they're organized, to be able to do that maturity journey and to have the kind of display those characteristics of highly successful security shops.
Okay, I think that's really interesting, this idea of muscle groups and maturing their journey. So you've been in this role or in security for a long time. How have you seen application security evolve over the last few years, and where do you think it's heading? What's the future of AppSec?
AppSec reviews look a lot different today than they did 20 years ago. It used to be that folks were, doing a lot of manual code reviews and code writing. And I think that while AI has become this buzzword that I think sometimes overpromises or is just kind of misused, it is true that as we get closer to, engines that can review code, that we have a lot of promise for those kinds of tools there. And of course, as you look at the way that we're building today, we are building a lot more modularly. I mean devs, anyone who's building environments, you're building using existing sort of modular sets. So this might be something your cloud computing provider is giving you. It might be templatization and other things that you're vending yourself, whether that's from CloudFormation or Terraform, or whether it's, the templates that you're able to vend yourself on GitHub and other repositories. But like, there's a lot less, hopefully, a lot less manualness to it, and a lot more tooling that can help you do, well, there will always be human elements, but you can do it in a more systematized way and not have these, special snowflake environments. The goal is always to minimize those kinds of unique environments, because we want to be able to review and then put in place, known pruned environments from permissions perspective, from escalations and other things. Security folks care about more than making it work. We care about making it work securely.
Okay, so you mentioned AI and it's such a buzzword, so I kind of have to ask, like,
okay.
In your experience, I sort of get the impression that it's being very widely used already in development, and do you see that? What kind of challenges does that bring to AppSec? I mean, we're hoping for the positives, but like right now we're kind of still in I think there's like a no man's land of like, is it good, is it bad? So like, what's your take on that?
Taking my hair down for this one. So I think it is, when you say it's being ubiquitously used, I think it's being ubiquitously used mostly as a word and not as a function. I think we're exploring, as you say, like what the kind of good, bad, and ugly of it are. And I don't think that it is wise to have sort of normative judgments about it. While we know that there are some dangers, I also think it's really exciting to explore ways that it can help. And of course, as I mentioned, like for a long time, computers have been hopefully taking off of our plate kind of things that are not fun for humans to do, whether that's broad scale sort of like manual compute functions, whether it is, the ability to see in a bunch of places over time that now gets replaced by sensors. Like there are ways in which I think we should, of course, embrace the usefulness of computers, and AI is part of that. And as we get into the ability to have more data than we've ever seen, Lacework actually as a company has like this underpinning philosophy that security is a data issue. The ability to correlate data in meaningful ways and then to act upon it is really what we're talking about when we talk about doing security. I think obviously that's that's not the start and end of the conversation, but it is a core principle of mature security shops now that we like almost take for granted, that you can have almost what feels like unlimited data. So like in the cloud, everything is an API call. And that's going to be in your CloudTrail. If you're in AWS, it's, there's other metrics like CPU usage and everything in CloudWatch, but it's sort of like, it's not what you have, it's what you do with it, right? So being able to then do compute on top of it and have it be really lightweight and have it be cheap and have it then be contextualized with other insights, like all of this, I think refers to some of what we are hoping for AI to make even stronger, to be able to do some correlation of previously unknown data that you don't have to rely on your own sample sizes and so on and so forth. That being said, like you said, I don't see it as some silver bullet, as you know, being a security person, like we don't have those around. There are definitely, breakthroughs that are really exciting, and cloud computing was one, and mobile applications was one, and infrastructure as code because of those is one, in my view. Low code, no code, we're getting glimmers of really exciting stuff, serverless and managed servers or services that allow you to do less as the user. All of these things are exciting. You still have to go build your stuff and go secure them. And so I think there's a lot of promise there, and we're still going to have to work at it and make it work for us.
Okay, so I want to dig a little deeper into that AppSec being a data problem. I think that's really interesting. So, do you think that the amount of data that we have is part of the issue, and that we can't put it in context? Or, is there some other challenge that's even bigger than kind of a data problem facing AppSec today?
I really think so. The best, well, one, I'd be curious what you think about this, and listeners, pipe up here, because I think there's a lot of data is another word that has both kind of literal and term of art meanings. But I think that as we move toward a more, as I mentioned, sort of more modular future where folks are using building blocks, so this might be services and managed services, they have underpinning code, but you don't have to write that. In the case of managed services, you don't even have to patch them, but you do have to architect securely. So I think we're going to continue to see a move toward, AppSec taking the form of not just clean code reviews, which, by the way, have those, available tooling more than they did before, like Code Pipeline and Code Guru, but also moving toward ArchSec or architectural security reviews, where you're looking at what folks are doing with it. I still think that all of that is basically, as you suggested, in a sense, is pointing toward the fact that raw data, at this point would be overwhelming to try to corral every time in a, I was going to say perfect, but there's very few things except that are engineering wise perfect, in a very robust way. And so the reason that we modularize, and the reason that we create templates of known good environments that folks can then spin up for, let's say, their R&D team or for their HR team, which will have vastly different permissions, is so that you don't have to do it every time. In theory, you could write those fresh every time you need one, and it's not a good security practice, and it's also not a good engineering practice because it'll take you longer.
Yeah, it's taking time.
So yeah, the balance between raw data and then putting that together in ways that are replicable and that then help build that machine.
So let me ask you, I mean, we keep on mentioning the word modular, right? Modularize, and I get that that's to sort of design repeatable structures that will save you time, right? You've got a good secure structure, you can just repeat that. But do you think having this modularization is lending itself to data silos in security and kind of this whole lack of context, right? We've got so many different scanners and so many different environments that are sending us alerts. How do we make sense of it? And is it one problem that we're getting 15 different alerts on, or is it 15 different problems? How do you, how does modularity fit into context? And is that a problem that we need to solve?
I'm okay with silos. I think that we should have kind of a healthy friction between, or at least the practices that I have seen work at this stage of, development maturity, speak to the fact that having silos is not necessarily a bad thing. It has negative attributes. Folks will be building some overlapping tooling, integrations may be tough. The security team has to find a way to put umbrella arms around the enterprise while also allowing folks to run with their products, but just as with any other entity out there, whether you are a pharma company or a higher education school or a government entity, folks have deliverables that they're trying to get out the door. And from what we know right now, the fastest way to do that is in small, agile teams that are constantly assessing, their deliverables instead of doing those longer term waterfall cycles. So I think that, having that modularity. I'm actually speaking to a lot of the time in the architectural sense that you're not, writing your own tooling for security data lakes. You might use Amazon Security Lake, or that you might then be able to take, the tooling, whether it's Lacework or your vendor of choice to put on top of that, whether it's Psycho to do some of your AppSec reviews, that you're able to kind of turn this into something that you don't have to spin up from raw materials all the time, but that you're able to extract insights from and both build and then do security around in ways that are more packaged.
Okay, so I guess the thing I'm concerned about, having small agile teams, it sounds good, but are we missing the big picture? Are we kind of missing big trends that maybe could prevent some kind of breach or incident from happening because we're so focused on smaller bits?
Hopefully not. I mean, I think your security team needs to own the security of your entity while the product teams own the security of each product, right? And so there is this kind of, AppSec is a process that, at least in the enterprises I've worked at that work well, like AWS and here at Lacework, the product teams build and are responsible for the security of their own product. And of course, they're working off of deliverables that are roadmapped based on customer feedback. So they are not building for the security team, they're building for external customers, right? And that's their feedback that's their kind of like North Star that they're chasing. Meanwhile, the internal security shop, their North Star is, it's getting stuff out, but it's keeping it secure. I mean, their number one goal is not to get products out, it's to make sure that no product gets out that is insecure, right, or that has unreconciled security issues. There will always be some known risks that you assume. So I think there's, that team mentality can be construed as a tension. I mean, like going back and forth between the build and the review cycles. Mm-hmm. But I actually think that's fine. They can be a healthy tension as long as they're not holding each other back. Like as long as it is one where I think of it, and I have a legal degree, but I think of it as sort of like the courtroom where like everyone has a role to play, and it is not the prosecutor's job to figure out what, the judge is going to think about. It is their job to make the best case they can. Like everyone needs to be doing their job, and the system itself kind of relies on that tension so that folks don't, have to take on multiple roles and possibly kind of sublimate the goodness of the product itself. If you're the product person, of the security itself, if you're the security person, I think we create better outcomes when we don't sublimate to each other by, second guessing what our job is.
Okay. All right. So then, you are a CISO, and, so what is the ideal relationship between CISOs and AppSec? And can you talk a little bit more about how they can best work together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, in most environments, CISOs are not necessarily super in the weeds with their AppSec team, but mm-hmm. they have some, obviously they have some direction, they have some risk tolerance that they are imparting to the overall team, and especially the AppSec team, to think through. And this will be refined, or, CISO and other leaders will help refine this in real world scenarios where, you may say that you are willing to tolerate whatever it is, 1,000 drop calls per second. And then you get into a day where that happens for 4 hours, and it's like, why did we choose this threshold? Maybe we shouldn't have picked it. There's so much in here that requires, and I think mature security teams will always have those kinds of metrics conversations or meetings that, whether reviews, hot washes, or whatever form they take them in, but where they say, why did we pick this? Was this the right way to approach it? Was it a known or an unknown? Was this a risk that we were willing to assume and tolerate or not? All shops have to make some judgment calls here, but I think the point isn't to be perfect. The point is to, continue to kind of whittle away at it and refine, and also to hopefully make them as consciously as possible. So I think the role of the CISO is to give direction around how to think about those judgment calls, to sometimes make escalation, like hard judgment calls, given the data that they have, that their team is giving them. And then mostly, to be honest, I think that CISOs are better when they are technical, and also when they get out of the way of their technical people. So like, it is good to be a technical person, but not to be the one who's in there micromanaging it.
Yeah. So would you say, I mean, who's driving the priorities when it comes to AppSec? Is it the AppSec team informing the CISO, or is it the CISO kind of giving direction and pushing it down, or is it a two-way street? What do you see as most common?
I think both. I would want to know what my team recommendation is and why. And I would also expect to make a judgment call that doesn't always line up with exactly what they think should be done, in part because CISOs have to balance other pieces of business, right? They've got the CEO who may want to move fast and break things, as they say. They've got, other pieces of liability or considerations that, the AppSec team may say, I think this is a thing we can tolerate, but you as the CISO happen to know that there are legal issues or regulatory issues that are coming down the pike that we, can't tolerate around whatever is open source or other, supply chain issues or something that's popping on an AppSec review. There may be all sorts of considerations that hopefully a thoughtful CISO is kind of factoring into those escalation calls that they have to make. But I think the point is you get those wheels turning so that your folks in AppSec are doing the kind of, your automations, you're doing templatization of your environment. So you're not having to do painful AppSec reviews all the way through. You've got security engineering involved with the way that you're developing those environments in the first place. Then you've got, the AppSec review that is complementary to those that can tell, now that we have tooling that can do discoverability and, so this an access analyzer type thing for IAM permissions. It could also be network reachability with inspector and other things. We have, at least we have like a threat escalation channel, tooling that will tell you possible channels. So like you're making use of tooling again, but like it's not going to do it for you. And then as you get to final AppSec reviews, you're making judgment calls around when things are ready to push and what kinds of production they're ready to push to. Like it becomes this multi-pronged or whatever, like this kind of whittled down approach. And meanwhile, those truly high stakes judgment calls are hopefully not happening every day, because you've got your machine that's kind of like refining it as you go.
Okay. You had mentioned a few minutes ago about like reporting requirements and regulations, right? And that's always something that is in the back of AppSec practitioners' minds, especially with the new SEC disclosure regulations that are coming into effect. So, that's just in December, so just a couple months away. What do you think, what should AppSec be doing to prepare for it? And, are there any reporting frameworks? Again, you mentioned reporting is always, a challenge. Are any reporting frameworks that are going to be more helpful than others?
Yeah, good question. I think so AppSec is one of an entire org that will now be responsible for reporting. The new SEC guidelines require that folks report within 4 days. By folks, I mean entities that are subject to SEC guidelines. So public companies that do business in and with the United States. Within 4 days, if they suffer something that is material, and and this is in a cybersecurity incident context, and the materiality standard is based on shareholders caring about it. So I think that's an interesting thing. So like even what you or I might find very hairy as a finding from AppSec that says, oh my gosh, we should have written this better or whatever, if it didn't impact something that shareholders care about, it is unlikely to fall under that. So I think that's just an interest, folks need to keep the lens of what is and isn't material close on this. So, interesting stuff that we can document didn't have any impact is probably not something that matters here. And then the other requirement is that they have a like a process for discovering this type of thing, that they have, I forget the exact wording, we can put it in the show notes, but that they have basically a program that would allow it to be discovered if they did have this kind of issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the focus. I think the SEC wants, they're not telling you how to do AppSec or any other of your security programs, but they want to know you have one. They want to know that you're doing the kinds of measures that would allow you to know about this, and that once known, now the newness is this new timeline of 4 days. Because in theory, if it was really impactful to your shareholders, even before this requirement, it would have been on your quarterly 10K. So anyway, I think the requirements, hopefully, so I will tell you my aspirational view, which is that I hope it will give CISOs and AppSec teams and other folks, the tools to go to their board, to go to their CEO, to be, vocal about what's at stake here, and make sure that all these determinations are being done with a conscious mind, that they're getting resources if they need them to be able to make these determinations, that they're able to kind of line up what the business says it cares about with what they're actually able to achieve. And I think that's often, the thing I hear from folks all the time is like, I know I need to do, this list of hard stuff, whether it's patching or moving assets to cloud, or, lining up my OT and IT, or getting better visibility on multi-environments, or whatever it is. I know I need to do this, but I don't have the budget or the resources to do it. And I'm kind of like, that's not a you problem. That should be on your CEO and your board. You need to document what it's going to cost them in possible outages, in possible, security incidents and breaches, in possible losses to the business of innovation. You need to be the one who makes the case for it, and then the business makes a call. So ultimately, I think this is one more, I hope, this is one more aspect that we can point to of why security matters. And I'm, I know I'm preaching to the choir with a lot of security folks, but lining it up with business objectives.
Yeah, I think all of us who work in security think our jobs definitely matter. Well, I don't think there's going to be an argument there.
Right. But it's one of those things where I think we almost take it for granted that it's so interesting and it's so evident that it matters. And I think for folks whose bottom line is a different literal bottom line, this may translate it over to their world.
Okay, so I think this is a good segue into the, there's been a lot made of harmony, building harmony between security, DevOps, engineering, right? And if we all can just get along, everything's going to go more smoothly. But it kind of seems like, you've said they all have their own bottom line, and that maybe a little bit of conflict is not bad. So what's your hot take on shifting left? I mean, do you think it's a worthwhile endeavor, or is it just, a bunch of buzzwords?
Yes and yes. I think it's definitely, I think most organizations these days know that they need to, both shift left and shift right. So they're shifting left in terms of being able to do more in cloud that allows them to do that infrastructure as code and security as code, to come back to golden AMIs and other, embracing templatization and immutability and then ephemerality too. At the same time, there's still a huge role for the security team, especially when we're allowing devs to run so hard and fast. And if we get to the point where, which I think a lot of shops are, where they're expecting AI and other tools to even author their code, we need to have a lot of thoughtful practices from humans that may be deployed by robots or, by automation. But that allow us to get visibility to then get, so for example, in AWS, again, this is just my frame of reference, it's true across any cloud or other environments, but turning on your cloud trail, because that is not a given, you need to be getting those logs, then being able to do that at a delegable way, so doing it through permissions kind of factories like AWS organizations and SEP, service control policies, then doing it so that it makes its way over to something that you're devs are able to run with from the template side, and then the security team is able to have arms around and do AppSec and ArchSec reviews on before they go to production. Like all of these should be sort of orchestral and that they're different sort of segments, but they, that takes work. And it's also, yeah, like you said, there are gonna be folks with different bottom lines. Like it's no wonder that if you give a dev, sort of like if you give a mouse a cookie, you give
yeah.
they're gonna want a glass of milk. No,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like they that's fine from their objective standpoint, unless you have given them other objectives to weigh in there, or a security engineer embedded in the team who's helping write their templates without it, or whatever. Like you have to have the arms around it that change those incentives.
Okay. So do you think security needs to be incented or do you think engineering needs to be incented and have security as part of its goals?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think you have to find ways to enforce that so that you're not just telling, good intentions are not enough. You can't just tap people on the shoulder and be like, Sheila, you are a great dev, and now you need to care about these other things. That's great. And I think we can say that, but we also need to enforce it, right? It's got to come down to permissions, and that's going to be frustrating to devs. But hopefully what you're doing is creating these kind of paved roads that actually allow them to do secure things without a lot of friction. And it'll still go through a review process because we know that that's important, but it ends up being a really streamlined thing if we can have folks explain what they're trying to do and what they're, if you see, so for example, if you're the security team seeing a bunch of metrics from one team running into your guardrails all the time, either they are going off the rails or you are not permissive enough. And so you switch over to a more, more permissive, and you log and monitor and end up having to do log dives instead to make sure that stuff, if you end up using open source libraries that have a known vulnerability that comes to light, then you have to go figure out which ones you had been using. Like these all come with kind of push-pull mechanisms, but you get better at it, and it's not just lip service. Like you have to actually, shifting left is not a notion. It's a thing. It's a framework that you actually go employ.
Okay, great. I think that's a great place to stop, and I want to jump into a couple of questions because we're running close to time. But the first question I have is, can you share the differences between ASPM and CSPM vendors? And do large enterprises need both? How do they work together, or how can they work together both best?
So I think that this acronym is Application Security Posture Management and Cloud
Security Posture Management, yep.
I will tell you that I am not an expert on vendor tools. As I mentioned, of course, like having worked at vendors, like I care about offerings, especially when we are talking about specifics, but this is not something where I'm here to pitch one or the other. I think that when we think about posture management tools, part of what we're talking about is the ability in cloud to reason about what you've done. So like, 20 years ago, it was someone's job to go make sure your VMs were plugged in, and they would go do it twice a week, and then you would know that you could move forward. Those jobs are turning into logical controls. Now you need to, or not need to, but now you can beacon and know that. And so I think that when you're looking at cloud security posture management, a lot of what it reflects is that like you're actually doing a lot of, I've referred to that architectural security review, like you're doing a lot of the things that might make you vulnerable. And it's around the permissions you're granting. It's around whether you've created an internet facing endpoint. So like identity and the internet, like the edge, are basically a lot of your concerns when you're in a posture management review. And so I think having tools that do that for you, and obviously there are some native ones, but having vendors who can do that for you, especially with, I think one of the big benefits of CSPM tools is that they let you customize your alarms. So like you might be a shop that has a bunch of public S3 buckets, and that's actually what you want. Like you are, you're publishing user manuals. Like you want those to be on the internet. That's the whole point. So being able to prune down your alerting so that you get better signal to noise. Application security posture management, I mean, I think that it is in my view anyway, it is a subset of CSPM, because you can build applications in the cloud, but you can also build other internal facing stuff. And at some level, what we're really talking about is the fact that your cloud provider owns that hardware layers and you're building on top of them. So there's, there's known best practices and the ability to prune. Do you need both? I mean, I don't know authoritatively, but in my experience, most folks who are offering one offer the ability to do both with their platform.
I mean, conversely, you could see ASPM and CSPM being a subset of ASPM, right? Because your applications are most likely being
application layer, if you're right.
Right. So it's just a matter of where you're starting from. Are you starting from the cloud and moving left? Or are you starting
out here? But yeah, unless you're running like Fargate and Outposts and you're like doing not application level configurations, which happens in cloud.
All right, one last quick question. What is the number one thing security teams can do to enable business outcomes and goals?
The one thing security team?
Yeah, if you had one thing, one like nugget of wisdom?
Make a seamless trouble ticketing system that like a fully API driven low latency trouble ticketing system that does force blameless escalation so that no one has to like email repeatedly to ask for permission to access stuff, and that things can be granted, like getting out of the way. But I know it's unsexy and you were probably expecting me to say something like get up.
Very profound.
I don't know anyone who's not captured to trouble ticketing still, and the reality is that it already authenticates and authorizes, and so it saves you steps on the identity front of seeing who's asking for access or whatever you're asking for. Like if you have an employee who's moving to a different state, like that should also become a trouble ticket, and then you can track your time to respond, your time to resolve. You can increasingly write automations. It's just like the one beautiful thing that security teams can really do for their customers, their internal customers, is like help them vend themselves the permissions they need and see where it's at and get out of the way so they can go do the stuff they need to do. I think that's a really unsexy but important element of any security shop.
Okay, great. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. I feel like that time went by in just a flash. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions. If there are any questions that we didn't manage to cover, we will follow up with you individually afterwards. But I do think we got through.
I'm on Twitter at Merritt Baer, and I'm happy to put my contact info in the show notes too. You can find me.
Okay, great. Great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and special thanks to you, Merritt, for such brilliant insights into the CISO's world. And for next steps, either follow Merritt on Twitter, or I guess X, as we're supposed to say now, and or please head to sitecode.com/resources for more materials like this. And our next episode should be coming soon, next month. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.